Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's Farmington School Board meeting. It's October 5th. Would you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, we have public participation. We have available through our Google Meet, but also we have a local phone number. Is that on the site or no?
I believe so, and it's 755-2811, extension, it's on there. It says on the phone, Charlie.
Top left.
Oh,
The Charlie. What's
2104?
That's it.
2104. Look at that. It's right in front of me. 2881?
Yes.
Okay, I wrote it down.
2811.
2811. Okay. We have some updates, but we also have a member from the 500 Boys Club here about their facility use request. So I don't know if the board wanted to move that up.
I'll move that we take it out of order and move the old business Farmington 500 facilities use requests up on the agenda.
Do you have a second? I'll second for discussion. Anyone have any issues with doing that? Not hearing it. All in favor?
Aye.
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 So go ahead. You're up. If you'd like to step up to the mic and state your name for the record and let us know what you're looking for.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm KJ Cardinal on Main Street. I was just wanted to come in and kind of talk to you guys a little bit to see what the thought was, if there was any discussion yet about the facility use request form we put in back in July. Obviously, completely understand what's going on, and you know, this fall part of that facility request was volleyball for the Farmington 500 and also basketball. So it really went from early September all the way through the end of March was the facility use request. So at the time when I sent it in, obviously with everything going on, we just decided that volleyball would be best served to be outdoors, and we did that. And we are doing the outdoors at Paulson Road, but obviously now we can't plan on basketball outdoors. So just trying to get the pulse of everybody and see what's going on. We have families that are asking. I'm the vice president, but I'm also the basketball director.
Yep.
And last year we had 162 kids play last year. So it's really it impacts a lot of families in general, and just we're not really sure what we can do because we don't have a indoor facility that could house anything near that. So just wanted to see what the school's thoughts were. I know athletics was backburnered at the beginning, understandably, and we're just trying to come up with a plan.
Right. Now, your facility that you have on site, I assume that's up and operational?
On Paulson Road?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's not a basketball facility.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're just using that for?
It's mostly we plan on putting turf in there. Actually, we had a plan in place to put turf in there before all this stuff broke out. We were hoping to do that this summer.
Yeah.
So right now it's just concrete floor. It's a good sized building, but we're going to do like batting cages. Karate currently uses it.
Okay.
Futsal plays in there. Yeah.
Okay. Tim?
KJ, does the 500 Boys Club still service Milton and Middleton as well as Farmington students?
Yeah, of the 162 for basketball, I believe 110 were Farmington.
Okay.
So there's a lot of Middleton, just because of the history with the relationship, but then also we do have like some Milton, some Alton. We had a couple Rochester kids this year, and stuff like that. But yeah, that's pretty much the breakdown of it. Yeah.
So is any of the other cities and towns that you serve, have any of them extended the olive branch and made any of their facilities available to 500?
I haven't really asked. No one's reached out to us about that. I haven't really asked. There was actually an email that went around amongst some of us basketball directors kind of in the Seacoast just this morning, where some towns are in the same situation, you know, that they use the school facility and they're currently looking, because they're not sure about the school, and they're currently looking for other facilities. So that could be potentially something we would do, but just knowing that our price point is very affordable for the people in town, that if we had to go elsewhere, that price is going to be a lot higher, so.
What is your beginning, or what would you perceive if we were to approve it as being your start date?
We typically start either this, depending on the calendar works, either the Saturday before or after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And I'm mostly just, we're completely open to being creative, and obviously we know that things aren't going to be business as usual, but.
Yeah. One of my concerns is the Monday through Friday schedule, because we're currently using the gym for school operations. We're spending a significant amount of money on cleaning. And my personal opinion, I'm not speaking for the board, but I don't think we can have an outside agency in, get that gym clean to the standards that we need under CDC, and have school the next day. That part's going to cause a problem. My other concern is if we have it on, say, Saturdays and/or Sundays, and again, I'm speaking for myself, I need to see a safety plan similar to our athletics department has, and I need to see a vision for how we're going to get those clean. Mm-hmm. Because right now, again, we're spending a significant amount of money to get those areas sanitized. Mm-hmm. I think for the elections, the town spent $4,000 for one sanitation. So kind of, is it cost prohibitive at that point because of what we have to do to maintain the cleanliness of the gym to be able to extend, those gyms to the 500 Boys Club?
Yeah, I know. I honestly feel that the weekday thing is out. In general, that's kind of what I would expect almost, just because that exact thing. We would just, again, historically, what we've been doing the last couple of years since I took it over is we would have 2 hours a week, 2 days a week, 2 hours. So it'd be like 6 to 8, usually like Wednesday and Thursday. And then Saturday, we'd have Saturday, which is like, that's the normal 500 Saturday that's been for 60 years or whatever. But that's pretty much all day. And then we do have travel teams that play on Sundays, but that's where I'm thinking those may have to go like off-site anyway, just because they'd want to play and practice during the week, and that, if that's not an option, it's understandable.
So you would be looking for like Saturday only?
I would take anything that we could get, and we'll figure out a game plan. I mean, I've kicked around a lot of options in my head and with some of our other coaches and things like that, just trying to get creative on ideas. So I mean, whatever we're able to do, we'll most certainly come up with a safety plan. I mean, we started playing soccer and volleyball down at Paulson Road. And we have like 140 or 150 kids combined that are playing those sports right now. So I think those numbers are down, and I think our numbers will be down a little bit, but we'll come up with a plan. I mean, and anything you guys are looking to see, we can provide.
I think the other thing that I'd like to do is get input from Larry, who's the facilities manager, before we make a decision, because he's the one that knows the standards on what we have to do with cleaning. We just added a significant amount of staff to deal with what we have to do in-house on our own.
Well, I think we're trying to add the staff.
Trying to add staff.
Yeah.
We've added overtime to start
Overtime,
that.
right.
And overtime, et cetera. So I think I'd like to see the 500 Boys Club in the school. But we also have to look at some numbers and pricing, et cetera. And that's one of the reasons why I asked you where you have to go. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I'd like to have that consultation with Larry to say, can this work or no, and what is the cost? And then sit down with you guys and see what, if anything, we can manage.
Yeah, and just kind of how the 500 has, we always try to get creative. We have amazing volunteers, so
Yep.
not saying or for sure if it would be acceptable or allowed or anything to have volunteers do some of those cleaning efforts, but we'd be willing to foot some of that bill, all of it, whatever, like just knowing what that would be, and trying to have us kind of take care of a lot of that cleaning if we could. I'm not sure if that's allowed.
Right.
But.
So what are we holding now, Ruth Ellen, for gym, as far as, say, volleyball? We got a weekend schedule, and we have some during the week, or is it just on the weekend?
They're doing practices during the week, And then games are, I don't believe they've been scheduled for Saturday, Sundays at this point, but we're needing to look at open tournament, which is another conversation the board needs to have tonight. One of the things that I would say with 500, because we have limited for our sports having fans come in from other places, that's a whole lot harder to do when you're talking about younger kids. And I know that in the past, and it has been better, but we've had kids all over, which we can't have if we're dealing with trying to do the additional cleanings. And so I think part of that plan would also need to be, how are you limiting access? Because if we're going to have numbers that far exceed what we're already doing, we're kind of blowing our whole contact tracing out of the water. So I would want to see that as part of what you're proposing.
Right, I think that Tim's idea is a good one as far as meeting with maybe Ruth Ellen and Larry, as far as to see if there's some time that can dovetail into what we're already doing, so we're potentially cleaning, maybe not cleaning additionally, I don't know if that's possible, staggered time, so we're just, say, cleaning at the end of that day for things that you could use for time and the time we're already using. Cleaning's the big issue, screening, and also limiting of people entry to the minimum, whatever that would be, and see if they can come up with something that's workable to bring back to the board, because we just can't say, oh, go ahead and use the gym during the week if we can't get it done.
Or even on
right now, or the weekends, because we've got, we've trying to backfill with what we need for the cleaning staff. We've got temporary positions. We've got overtime. We'll contract people that we haven't even, I have not heard that we've met our need yet.
We haven't.
So we're still trying to backfill the need that we know we have. So I think that if you work with, because you're talking starting the last week in November. So there's some time to maybe see what can be worked out, to see if there's some space that we can allow you to use as far as time-wise. But it's really going to be up to staff to say, we can work this in, and this is what it's going to cost, or time and effort money, are we going to be able to do it at no cost? Can we even do it at all?
Right.
And what, the minimum would be, this is what we can do with what we're already doing. Okay, and to add to that, this is what we need, and this is what it's going to cost. Whether it can be supplemented with volunteers under direction, I don't know. It's something that the staff has to accept. Maybe it's possible volunteers with somebody that we're using as a supervisor to make sure it's done correctly. I don't know if that's feasible or not.
Yeah, like I said, we're open to whatever you guys are thinking. That's why I wanted. And also is that. Late November, that's kind of historically, I feel like history is out the window when it comes to what's going on right now. So I completely, we've kicked around the idea of pushing things back and things like this. So if that would be an option, anything we would be willing to try to do. I am on the athletic council here with Mr. Larkham, and so I was involved with the process of putting forward the handbook that he had come up with and stuff like that. So we could definitely put together something that could mirror a lot of those protocols and things like that, because that's exactly what we all know it has to happen. So
yeah, as far as, especially when one concern is screening. If you've got 162 kids, what are you currently doing for screening as far as before events? And that would probably have to be matched with a minimum of what we're currently doing for our volleyball, which I think we've made it some changes to it, necessary changes.
Good.
But I think if they can work with Larry and superintendent to come up with, like I said, first one, this is what we can do at no cost, and to do additional, this is what we would need, and how can we backfill that, I don't know if it's possible, backfill with volunteers with supervision by our staff, or outside people, and what that cost would be, that and whether or not we could cost share any of that.
So do you want me to talk to Larry directly on that stuff, or go through you?
Talk to
or-
Ruth Ellen.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Shoot
And,
me some dates. I will
Yeah.
get with Larry,
Yeah.
and the three of us will sit down.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we'll see what we can start with to bring back to the board to
Okay.
say, here's what we think might work.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I mean, we know it's a crazy time, obviously, so we're all trying to figure out what to do. We don't know that there's a great solution that we have internally, so we appreciate the school always letting us come here. We feel like we take care of the place when we're here, so hopefully we can continue that, so.
KJ, one of the things I noticed with our volleyball team is we've limited access to parents, but the online views of those videos are amazing as far as numbers. I know that's kind of like your business, and
Yeah.
one of the things I could see this board doing is we allow no more than 2 guests per player on a home game. I don't see the 500s being
That's for the home team, that's not for
home team.
away, yeah.
I don't see 500 being allowed more than that.
Yep.
So if you guys have the capability of videotaping them, that may keep your children's parents
Yeah,
or whatever,
definitely. Yep, that could be an option for sure, yeah.
happier than kind of what we're dealing with.
And also, just how it works is like the 500, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of teams, a lot of different ages and different things going on. But what I'm really focusing on now is like the 500 town league, basically like rec league. So every kid that plays makes a team. You don't have to try out, everyone plays. So there's not, in those groups, there's not like other town teams coming in. There's some kids from other towns that last year have come in to play. But it's not like there's like a Milton team coming to play. There may be like 5 or 6 Milton kids that play, which we could limit that if we needed to be or whatever. But that's just how that portion works. The travel teams are the ones that are usually like the all-stars that have to try out for those teams. And I'm not even worried about that at this current moment. Because I do think there are some other options that we're exploring for that. And also knowing that usually it's been like Saturdays is the house league and Sundays is the all-stars travel teams, so.
Can we set up a meeting of who KJ needs to talk to within the next 2 weeks so that
yeah.
we can give him some direction or put it on the agenda for 2 weeks to...
Tomorrow
Okay.
We'll probably get started this week.
yeah, I think they just
Even
gotta
if
go
it's
through
by
Ruth
Google.
Allen to
Okay.
Yeah.
come up with a plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what they can do in this various, I mean, there may be multiple tiers of that plan. This is what we can do free, this is what we do with volunteers, and this is what
Right.
we do with additional money for the things that we're lacking.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Getting back to updates. First on the agenda is sports.
Very good segue. Let me go to that piece here. You have in your folder a quick one page, and Eric's not able to be with us tonight, so I'm going to do my best. Oh, you are? Okay, very good. Never mind. So I will let you take it away.
Okay, so one thing I've been directed by the NHAA is to bring to the board in regards to planning for the open tournaments, based on, we're basically trying to gather, I have surveys to do by certain due dates to kind of ask a couple questions on maybe maybe some of our restrictions going into the open tournament, so that each sports committee can make a decision on their open tournament. Not every open tournament is going to be the same, kind of based on more some of the feedback we get. So if you see in the notes or the page I made up for you, what they're really looking at first off is, will we participate in the open tournament? And then if so, what are some kind of restrictions? First one being restrictions for travel. Basically, typically once in a tournament, if you're the higher seed, you will be a host team. So there's some questions around that. Around basically, if you did host, are there restrictions on fans? If there are restrictions, what's the numbers? Or would your school rather not host events and just travel? And again, things specific to restrictions around fan numbers. Now, how it works typically in a tournament, which they're going to kind of go through, is there's certain rounds where the school will be kind of responsible for everything. But then once a team gets to the semifinal round and the final round of a tournament, NHIA takes over and kind of runs that. It's kind of part of their, they charge gate entry fees, etc. But they're trying to see what kind of our restrictions are to see if, to make a final decision on, what our expectations are and policies and procedures. So it's kind of just some information gathering so the sports committees can make some decisions specifically for their sport. So what I basically am looking to get first off is maybe some feedback on what may be restrictions for travel. So I know we currently in place, we have a regional place. We basically go about an hour out max. But say we're in this tournament, say volleyball, we're in a tournament, and all of a sudden we got to travel to Fall Mountain. In our proposal, we have, there was information basically stating that we're going to look at their positive case rates to consider traveling, but obviously in Fall Mountain or Hinsdale, shall I say, or all the way up in Colebrook is a lot outside of what we've been traveling. So I guess there's start there with any feedback on thoughts on there. Again, not something that's going to happen. We're not doing it during the season, but if some matchup happens and we're not the host team and we got to go somewhere, are we allowed to or are we not?
And I think one of the things to consider too, as we jump to the open tournament, we'd be looking at this for 3 sports because football doesn't have the numbers to continue at this point. So we would be looking at this for golf, soccer, and volleyball. Football won't be eligible for the open tournament.
Tim, question?
So when we look at each one of the sports, Mr. Larkham, what are the participants that are in the sports? How many buses would we need, and what's our budget allow for?
So transportation will have to be something that is going to be difficult for soccer, obviously, for away games during the week. They wanted to get information like this to set dates up officially. So if there's a lot of travel restrictions, especially for us, then we may not be able to travel during the week. Volleyball has a little more flexibility in the sense that start times, they're looking to get some information on that, so maybe we can have a later start time to allow for travel, especially for the further distance away. So realistically, with things like that, if there was a circumstance where we have to travel during the week, we don't have public transportation for that. Again, this is a one-time thing, so we would have to look to set up, either go by our policy of having transportation by parents, or look at some alternative transportation for that one event.
So my concern on the transportation is within the budget, we may have budgeted one bus, which is going to hold, with our social distancing requirements, 20 players. 26 players. So do we have a volleyball team or a basketball team that's going to participate in any of these tournaments that have over the 26 participants?
No, we do not. It'd only be one bus, no matter what.
Okay.
For soccer and golf both, the issue is going to be daylight because it would need to be early enough. They don't have lighted courses. Volleyball, we have lighted gyms. We've got a little bit more flexibility there for time.
But what are we normally doing in past years?
Well, in past years, we've not had the restrictions, so I would have potentially more opportunity to pull a bus and they would double up with the rest of the runs and but I can't do that.
So transportation is an issue because the buses are busy during the day.
Correct. If they need to leave before about 4:15, we can't do it. 4:15, we can leave.
I guess one of my concerns is, right now we're allowing sports with restrictions. In this tournament, we're significantly increasing our exposure in other communities.
Yes, we are.
And I guess, what are we going to do in addition to what we're doing now to ensure our students and athletes' safety and the safety of the remaining students when they come back? Because if we travel to a tournament, we provide the busing, and then we go to, say, Hinsdale, which is in Hillsborough County, and, we have a potential exposure. What are we doing for screening, or what are they going to be doing for screening at the event? And what are we going to be doing for screening before the event, and what are we going to do for screening after the event?
Right.
You look at professional sports, everyone's getting tested all the time. So we don't have that ability. So how are we going to maintain our contact tracing, and what are they going to have for additional testing or screening that's going to, I guess, make us feel comfortable to do this?
It's a good question. I think I really get the impression that right now the NHIAA is trying to figure out what schools would need in order to make this happen. There are schools that are likely going to say, just run the tournament, we're fine. That makes me nervous. I don't know that we go to the extreme of saying that group of kids who've gone to this other community, when they come back, are remote as a bubble together for so long until we know that everybody's clear. I don't know how long these tournaments are looking to last, but because they're open tournaments, we don't have as many teams necessarily participating across the state as we typically would have, but you have potentially more seeds going in, because it's not just the top 16 go into a tournament, it's everybody, and then start weeding it down. So it depends upon how many say yes, we're in, as to how long and how many games, how many exposures we might be looking at as well. And that, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but that hasn't been determined yet.
No. What common practice they're looking at right now, and volleyball's the closest, is that, so volleyball, our first round or two, is they're setting up pods for our region. So there's certain towns around us, they're going to play a tournament in that region, and then the winner of that region moves on. So they're kind of going to take in consideration some feedback of regional play, but again, knowing at the end result, say we have a team that just keeps moving along, that at some point, the further you go along, the more that we're going to kind of get outside that range. That's kind of how they're game planning.
How many students are impacted by the tournaments?
Students, right? Tim, did you say number of students?
Yeah, how many students are participating in the tournaments?
So how many volleyball, how many soccer?
How many?
So there's about 9 would be for volleyball, and then another 12, 13 for soccer.
And golf?
And golf has, it'll be 4.
Is it possible to have I'll throw this out there, is it possible to have a small quarantine period with the testing on all our participants in these tournaments? Is that even a remote possibility? Say if you've got 25 kids, and to allow them to be in these tournaments, is it something that we could do, say remote learning for 2 days with a test that would be administered at a medical facility, and say, yeah, everyone on the team is tested negative, can come back to school until the next tournament, to the next game? I don't know. Does that even make sense?
With the incubation period, I mean, if they're,
Yeah.
let's say they're at the game on Saturday.
Right, there's a
They're
2-day
tested
period.
Sunday.
Or say
we
2
get,
days later.
you know, or even 2 days later, which is pretty close to test. Usually
Yeah.
they say 5 to 7. Even if you go to 4 to 6, 4 days later, by the time you get a result back, you know, it'll be just before they would go to the next round if it were a week apart. If we do rapid testing, even so, to do a rapid test, it's pretty close because you could get 2 negatives before the positive shows up.
Right. I mean, I know in some colleges, I think in New Hampshire, they're testing,
Almost daily.
I think.
With some of them.
On-campus students, it's.
Oh, I'm
monthly,
talking about the athletes,
athletes,
if they're in a bubble.
But they're
UNH,
doing a rapid test?
UNH is doing their own in-house on facility.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that one of the other colleges has Quest on-site doing it at Plymouth State.
Okay.
I think they have Quest, and probably UNH probably has an outside contractor on-site.
They're doing it within their facilities. They have their own labs at UNH.
But are they contracting it out?
No, they're
No, they're
running
doing
it
their
internally.
own
Okay.
testing. Well, certainly we could have kids.
Typically, you know, typical, it's hard to always say typical, but when a normal playoff is happening, and that is with probably less teams, there's usually a max of 2 days in between games for rounds if someone moves further.
I'm just talking out loud here, but the way I'm leaning is we kind of went to the mat to open up sports within the district. We're talking a program that's impacting 25 of our kids, and what we're risking is a potential outside exposure, even into some of the hot zones, that's going to come back and affect 7,500 in-house kids,
You mean residents?
in-house students.
Well,
500.
yeah, it would be maybe
750.
750.
Where are we putting them? Yeah.
So, I mean, my thought process is skip the tournaments for this year. I hate to disappoint the 25 students, but I'd rather disappoint the 25 students than have something bad happen with the 700 other students that are in the facility. That's just me thinking out
Yeah,
loud.
I'm not going to disagree with that opinion because, to me, we have a lot of potential, because there's a lot of things we can't control. And we can't control what other people are doing as far as their safety protocols and screening. And if we send the soccer team off, 12 or 13 kids, and we get a couple of them come up positive and back into the schools,
We're shut down.
we're shut down. Because
Yes, we are.
And I don't know if they plan, maybe the NHIAA is maybe going to have some ability to get testing through a larger school district, like UNH says, okay, we're going to run this tournament, and they're going to provide all the testing for the tournament?
Not
Right?
that we've been told.
No, you've been told, but I mean, that would be something that if they could do that, I would be more amenable to. We don't have the system in place to do it here, but,
I don't know that I want our kids to go to UNH either. Just,
well,
There is,
they may be they could be just doing the testing.
true.
We could administer, maybe it's just, whatever the test is, done here, it goes to UNH. I mean, I don't know if they're looking into this, because they may find that a lot of other schools have the same opinion for the number of kids that would be in a tournament. They're not willing to take the risk unless there's additional testing and screening protocols in place.
one of the things that DHHS has been talking about is a 15-minute in-house test. It basically tests for antibodies. It's almost a self-administered test where you do the swab, it goes back into the package, and in 15 minutes you know whether it's positive or negative. My understanding with that test is you can get a false positive, but you can't get a false negative, from what I've read. And I think that's the test that DOE was talking about was going to be available sometime in the near future. Have we heard any more on that?
The last that I talked to the commissioner, he had said 5 to 6 weeks out. That was end of last week.
Okay.
And that was still in discussions with Commissioner Shibinette. There was nothing that was firm.
Solid. Okay.
It was a hope.
Yep.
And-
Because these actually exist in New Hampshire now.
Right.
They're using them now. It's a question of whether they buy them or whatever.
But if we were to take that approach, and so say there's 25% for chance for a false positive, even if it's 10%, if it's a 10% chance and you administer 13 kids a test, you're gonna come up with a false positive, just by statistically. So then you end up having to quarantine the whole
You
team
mean-
out until you get additional tests. So, it all depends on what that percentage is on a false positive.
Well, even
Because,
with
I
a
mean,
false
it's-
negative, then you send somebody in with everybody else that shouldn't be there
But
either.
if the assumption is that they don't get a false negative,
Yeah, the science that I read on this test is you won't get a false negative, but you may get a false positive.
but you gotta look at the percentage, because if you say if the
Right.
percentage is 25% or 15%, looking at the number of kids with testing, because if we come up with, say we got 24 kids, 25 kids, and we get one false positive, we're gonna have to take precautions like they're all positive. Or one could be positive and the other ones just haven't tested positive yet. So depending on the percentage of the reliability of that test, they may put us into quarantine the whole group on the first testing scenario. So, I mean, I'm not opposed
Puts
to
us right back to they
considering
don't
it,
participate, yeah.
but without additional testing and screening, if we have what we're in place, I would agree with Tim that I would opt to not doing it. And if we can't provide it, and if somebody else can't provide the additional testing and screening, I don't see how,
And the testing and screening is only good if everybody's doing it, not just our
Right.
district.
Right,
So
because
if
if
we're
we're the
going-
only ones testing and screening, that doesn't, I mean, it helps them to know that our kids are fine, but it doesn't tell us anything about their kids that are going to be with our kids.
and if this is a NHIAA tournament, I guess I will put the question onto them. What are they going to do for additional testing and screening that are gonna make districts like us comfortable to say, yeah, we're in? And the answer is, well, it's up to you guys, then I guess I say, maybe we should skip it. Because
So at this point, I think it sounds like Eric, and I know you haven't voted yet, but it sounds like we'd have Eric do the survey saying we would have travel restrictions and we would have restrictions based on needing additional testing and screening and knowing what the protocols are for that before my board would agree to participation.
along with limitations of spectators, if we have it here, I mean, that's a protocol we have now,
Right.
so we have,
So with that, they're looking at, if we're playing this other team, we limit and they don't, they'll send our kids there.
okay.
Which then puts our kids in with their lack of limits.
Right, that's why there be a need to, what is the additional testing and screening that's gonna be done outside this facility? And if they say, well, we're not gonna provide any testing before or after, then I would not be inclined to doing the tournaments. Because we need additional sureties for us to say, yeah, it's worth the potential exposure for this tournament. And I know Stan is online and Josh, so please speak up if you have an opinion.
I think it sounds reasonable, what you're saying, so that's fine.
I guess my other question to Mr. Larkham is, what are we talking about dates? Eric, is there anything, say, post-January that we could say, based on what a vaccination status is, we'll reconsider it at a later date?
That would be into basketball season.
Basketball season,
They're looking to
okay.
try to end this season,
This-
probably November.
Okay.
Would it go out as late as into December, Eric?
No, I mean, no, it's usually maybe a final. I don't know how much spacing they decide. But I guess, when you talk about the open tournament, the NHIA really has nothing to do with it until the last 2 rounds, really it's school to school. Just like we're doing right now. We rely on schools' protocols, both communicated, and that's kind of how we go through the season. And then the first couple rounds, probably 3 rounds, we'll do the same as well. Whatever school policies are, we follow pre-screening for all those protocols that each school agrees on.
Well, I think, my personal opinion is I think we ought to fill out the questionnaire stating, like Ruth Ellen said, what we would need, and see what they come back with. But at this point, if there's not additional testing and screening, I'm not inclined to vote yes. So I guess it's kind of fill out the information.
So we'll leave the limitations in place, fill out that, and come back to you with what we find out.
Yeah, because they may say, based upon the survey, we're not going to hold it, because they don't get enough participation. Or based upon the concerns, this is what we're going to add for additional testing and screening.
Right, okay. Do we need to have an official vote, or just to go forth and do?
I'll make that motion to fill out the survey and table a decision on whether or not we would enter into the events until we receive information back from the NHIAA.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Not hearing any discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous. Joel's not with us tonight, so that's 4
Okay.
votes.
All right.
Moving on next to technology. Thank you, Mr. Larkham.
Thank you. For technology, just to let you know that we have gotten that our fulfillments have been accepted on the Chromebooks. We're still waiting for the official ship date, but we are closer than most districts that still are waiting to even be heard.
When you say our fulfillment's been accepted, it's saying that they're going to come fill our order?
It means that the order will be filled, and that we have, right now, we have a guarantee that it's before the first of the year, which is not making me happy. It looks like we are closer to now potentially end of October, but because it's been pushed back, if we can find something else and get it in sooner, we have the option to still cancel that and move forward. So
So they said they're going
Jen
to
and
fill
I
out our order, which is past due, in the next 85 days.
yeah,
That's
you got
nice
it.
of them.
We are still looking to see what else we can find. There are other districts that said, oh, well, that's too far out. They canceled, and now they're further back, and they're hearing, way into beyond January because they'd canceled and lost their place in the queue. So we have some leads on a few things that we may be able to start getting some things dribbled in, but right now we're going to maintain that one order until we know we've got things in hand.
So where does that put as far as need? Where are we lacking in the short term? Say, do we have an immediate need that's not being filled in the next 2 weeks?
Right now, we've been able to cover those that need in the immediate. If I were to have to send all 3 buildings out, it puts second and third grade in most need right now. And we would have to really start scrambling or look at some things that are asynchronous to start with.
Can we
Go ahead, Tim.
survey those
Yep.
grades that are going to be impacted to see what our technological needs are? Because
Yeah.
there may not be a need there, that if we have to go on a full shutdown, mom or dad have a laptop, or there's a desktop at home, or something that's going to operate to get us through.
And we've done some, but I'm going to double check those numbers because they always seem to shift a bit.
Yep.
Yep.
And I think that kind of defines what our important or our priority need is getting the technology.
Yeah, because it may be if you're able to complete the survey to say at 90%, either by information that may change or you may not get response. You may be able to quantify, say, if this school goes out, this is the approximately, I got to have these tomorrow need. in those scenarios. So that comes up with, you've got 3 schools, and say you got 35 here, 20 here, and 15 there. And to say, okay, this is our needs, and
Then what else can we do to?
if we needed, say, 25, which is the worst impact, where are we gonna get them in less than 3 business days, and what's it gonna cost extra?
Right.
That kind of, because that'd be, I mean, chances of all 3 schools going out at the same time, I think,
Don't say that,
Careful,
please.
careful. Murphy's a line now, but we want to, yes.
but we could at least say this is the highest need.
Right.
So if the highest need is, say, Henry Wilson or the high school.
And
and
we
if
know-
If we have a backup plan for the highest need, if one of the other schools go out, we
Yeah.
could shift that over.
And we know now, I mean, Henry Wilson has been out, and we know where we are there. High school right now is 1-to-1. So our survey, I will resend for tomorrow or Tuesday, well, tomorrow is Tuesday. Get that out to folks and find out for sure where we are. Okay.
Is that the only issue that we have on technology?
We have,
I know there was some issue in, I guess, the bandwidth inside the schools.
we have made
Outside.
big strides in that, managed to correct some loops that had been introduced as they were redoing the phones. They got doing phones and internet at the same time. There were some loops that were introduced by having a few too many vendors in at once, and we've gotten those pretty well straightened out. We now have most of that taken care of. For instance, when you walk into a classroom and there are 17 screens up, it's like, hey guys, you can all be watching this one. Let's close those down, and lo and behold, the bandwidth is good. So looking to make sure that we don't have those types of competitions on the system happening all at once. So that has improved things greatly. Is it perfect yet? It's not perfect yet. We're getting closer. We're getting closer.
Did you get my email and I got the backup documentation that you put in the folder on the March bids for Wi-Fi? Did you see what I was talking about with the 2 different prices on those? There was, I sent the email, there was one that was in the $30,000 range that was supposed to support our 3 schools for that gigabyte of data.
Right.
Then there was another $10,000 that was funded for the SAU office within that bid spec anyhow. Whether that made it into the budget or not, I'm not sure. But that brings that number up to about $42,000, which I think is higher than you were predicting. So there may be some money there that if we do have to increase bandwidth at one of the troubled schools, it's kind of an area I'd like you to look at. And it's in the email, but I just,
Okay.
while we were talking about the problems, there may be some money there within the budget that we
We could
overlooked.
shift a little bit. Yep. Certainly willing to start looking at what else we can do there.
My other question, if I may, is, we went into a pretty quick shutdown in Henry Wilson. What's our status with 2-factor authentication?
We are looking to have that, as far as I understand, fully operational within the next few days. We have
Okay.
pieces of that ready to go, and should be definitely by the 1st of next week.
Okay, good.
Could you let us know when that goes online and to what extent?
Yep.
Because it may not go on 100%, but whatever it is.
Well, the switch will get flipped for everybody at once, so.
My other question is, I got a letter in the mail today on our screenings and gravitating, at least at the high school level, over towards using PowerPoint for our screening. Are we going to maintain
PowerPoint?
Power School?
Oh, Power School, okay.
I said PowerPoint,
Okay,
I meant
sorry.
Power School. Are we going to maintain the Google Docs that we're using now and supplement it with Power School? Is it going to be a complete transition over to Power School? What is the plan there?
I don't know what you received for an email. I know that we are.
I got an actual hard letter in the mail.
Okay. We are looking at switching over. Valley View has not been using Power School the same way, and we're trying to get that up so that we have families doing everything at once together. So I don't have a family who has a child in each building trying to maintain 3 different systems. But it would be good to have everything housed in one place. Right now, we don't want to shift until we know we can make it make sense for everybody.
Okay, so the letters that went out at the high school level, is that a voluntary or is that a mandatory shift in the way we're doing things now?
My understanding is that it's voluntary at this
Okay.
point.
All right.
Okay, moving on to space issues.
Received a call from the commissioner who had gotten the email from Mr. Brown, and he apologized for having perhaps answered too hastily prior to having had thorough vetting of his response, which is a long way to say that he's
Change his mind?
changed his mind a little bit. He is looking in terms of if we have parents who have started remote and we have space issues that would prevent them from coming back in, that they can stay where they are, provided that students are still receiving FAPE, which our students certainly are. That's a free and appropriate public education. And as long as we don't have issues with students not receiving the services that they are required to receive. We do have some classes that are right there, if not having exceeded the number to get to that 3-foot range. But with some of the other issues that we've had in schools, we've had a few folks decide to go remote. So we've had some fluctuation. I think probably the hardest thing is when the fluctuation is happening not because of, if there's a medical issue, certainly, we're going to work with the family, and that's a non-issue. But when we've had parents that, well, Junior was tired, so we're just going to let him remote in today. Okay, that's not its intended purpose. Either you're in or you're out. If it's, well, we're going to go on vacation, so we're just going to use this so we can remote from Florida. Again, wasn't the intent. So looking to see how the board wants to frame that.
I think
Go ahead.
what I'd like to see is accommodate the taxpayer as much as possible. Part of that includes a plan to prioritize our special ed students and our students that have a difficulty in remote education and need to get back in the building, that they're brought back into the building.
Which is what we've been doing.
From there, I think it's a space available technique where if we have to do a waiting list, we do a waiting list, and I think we fill our buildings to our safe capacity, and after that, we're going to do the best we can with what we have to do.
But I think her question is, if, say, parents want to flip-flop based upon their personal priorities, which are
Of the
not,
day.
that they're not subject to either health concerns or educational concerns, is that something that you're asking us if we should accommodate, or as far as saying, somebody wants to go on vacation for 5 days, take their students and be remote, or they don't feel sick today, so they want to be remote, and how, I guess my answer would be, I would like to see you recommend to us what you feel is reasonable, based upon what you can provide.
Right.
Because the difference is, today, I don't feel like bringing my students in because I want to be on vacation. The phone call is, we may have had an exposure, so we want to stay home because I want to go on vacation is not an acceptable answer. So what you heard of a phone changes. So it's no different than an employee who says, well, I've got a sick day, so I can cough into the phone, or it's a personal day, and I can just say I can't come in because I got to register my car.
Right.
Or go to the dentist. either way, we're still thrust with what we can deal with as far as those people students being in and out. I mean, we could say that's not really what it's intended for, but what we can accomplish for those changes,
Right.
whether it's,
You know,
I don't, I'd like to, you may want an answer, but
No,
I guess it's kind of like
understood.
recommending to us what you feel is, that you can deal with on a weekly basis as far as shifting gears, and then say, okay, this is what we can do based upon staffing, and teachers being remote, other students being remote, people coming and going, and saying, this is what we can do, and if we can't do that, this is what you need to do the parents need to do to ensure the child is getting their education. I mean, we can, as Tim says, try to make as best accommodations as we can, but we can only do that to a certain extent. You can't say everybody wants to go on spring break, so everyone wants to be remote 2 weeks before.
Right.
Logistically, we can't do that.
And I will say that the admin staff has been very accommodating with parents when, if a family reaches out and says, we have an issue, this is what we really need for right now, we've worked with them. It's when it's, 10 o'clock, we get a phone call that says, oh yeah, he's going to be remote the rest of the day.
Well,
So I think-
it's no different than, that one may be more simple, because if a student's not well to come to school, they would be absent.
Right.
So if we can't easily accommodate that child will be taking an absence. People go on vacation currently now, and they may get their work before, so that this child can work on it while they're on vacation. So if we can't accommodate structurally, that maybe it could be the same approach. Okay, we're going to gather up that work for the next 5 days. If we can't make that accommodation to be
But then
logged
the
on.
understanding is too, if they go on vacation outside of New England and on a conveyance that isn't personal, then
Right.
they're in quarantine for 2 weeks coming back, so.
I think one of the things that I've seen with our public is when we've asked them to do something, they've been very, very accommodating. The check-in slips in the morning have improved.
Yes,
The
they have.
number of parents that are driving their children to school. So part of the problem here might be our communication problem, where we're not communicating to parents what we expect from the two systems. So if you're in school, then you're in school. If you're remote, you're remote. However, we should define some remote limitations with our in-school kids, because number one, if they're not feeling well, we want them remote. We don't
Right.
want parents sending them into the building
Absolutely
to lose
not.
that day. Vacations, and again, if a building principal can accommodate that, then I'd say great, and if they don't, but there should be a communication period where if you're going to put in that request, it should go in, 2 weeks prior, reviewed by the principal, and it's a yay or nay with a discussion with the parent. But I think as we're moving along, we understand this stuff very well. I'm not sure that our parents do.
Fair enough.
So I think, I almost think of, and Mr. Roberts does it at the high school, and I think he does it very, very well, is every Sunday night an email goes out to the parents. And I think on a district level, as we're identifying this stuff, number one, we have to say thank you to the people that are helping us. And number two, just kind of bounce off what we're finding and what we need to shift to, because this is all new to us, and it's changing every single day.
Right.
So I think that communication might help you with part of the problem.
Sure. Happy to do that.
And if you need a policy from the board, I'd say come back to the board and give that policy. Otherwise, I think once we communicate and define our systems, the building principal should have discretion to work with those requests.
Because if you pose that question to us tonight, the answer would be, you'd get something from us that may not be the best solution, and chances are it wouldn't be, because we don't understand logistics. When you say there's
Right.
two scenarios,
No, understood.
one could be, this is 90% of it, and this other one is 10%.
Right.
And so, how to deal with it, not understanding being in the trenches. If we need to wade in with a policy, I'm sure we'd have no problem doing it, but I
Understood,
think
yeah.
we don't necessarily want to make it worse.
And I
understand
appreciate
your
that.
concern, but
Yep.
we can do what's reasonable, and when we can't do it, we need to say, this is not reasonable, and this is what we can do.
Yep.
Like I said, we'd like every student to have the same education, whether they're home or remote. But if we get in a situation through staffing where we can't accommodate that, the answer may be, we can't accommodate that right now, and this is all we can do, and whether it's gather
here's-
the work product.
Here's what we need you to work
I
with
mean,
us on.
we could run into that in the technology issue. We could have a school go out, we've got a technology need for 25 computers that we don't have, and the answer is, this is what we're doing for these students, gathering
Right
up the
now.
work, and you're working for days and getting it back in, because that's what we have to do,
Right.
until we answer that.
While we're on space issues, and I just kind of want to put this out, and I don't expect an answer tonight. I'd like it bounced around your admin staff. So if we look at what happened at Henry Wilson, and we went into a shutdown, and my primarily understanding of that shutdown is it affected a lot of staff and what we could do with staff. So my question is, if we go into a facility or a building shutdown, can we look at the feasibility of when we can, of bringing in some of our special ed and some of our kids that are in trouble into the building with a para in the class? And you may have a bunch of different classes for the students, but can they work remotely in that building with our people that are well to help them get through the remote process? Because I'm seeing.
And I would say that that's definitely an option once we get beyond the deep cleaning phase. Yes,
Right.
it should be.
Okay. And I just think it's, again, this is newness.
Yeah.
I don't have any complaints about what happened at Henry Wilson, but looking at it after the fact, could we have done this? And we'll talk a little bit on the critical incident debriefing in non-public, but is this an area that we can work at to get better?
I think one of the things we need to look at is the fact that it's going to be a case-by-case basis because it solely depends on who's standing at the point that we need to bring students in. And I need to be careful that I'm not identifying this staff member versus that one because of who can be in person with the student. So, but certainly something that we've talked about and we will talk more about, what can we do here to continue that service?
And on the space issues, I know you had given us a chart on last week, or numbers regarding to how many students left to max and so forth. When I did speak with Joel last week, he actually indicated that he was interested in potentially doing a walkthrough.
Sure, happy to do
And I
that.
said, yeah, I'd be more than glad to do it with you and Ruth Ellen to kind of go through what I
Yep.
did before.
Yep.
Because he had some questions, and I said, well, I'll ask you about it to see if that's something, I mean, it's according to his schedule, so it may not even be in a few weeks.
Right, understood.
But he indicated that he was interested in kind of do a walkthrough to see the layout and like I did, to kind of see for himself some of the logistic issues as far as the space.
Yep,
So, I mean, I just throw that out there and
let me know
maybe-
when, we'll make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think his schedule's
Going to be a little more,
right. So
Yep.
I think I just put it out there and maybe next week, we'll see.
We'll see what's
how his
possible.
schedule looks.
Okay.
And something he may say, don't worry about it. Because that issue may not rise to the surface of our biggest issue. As far as
Right.
that being a
Yep.
limiting factor, it may be something else.
right,
I mean, that's a
understood.
potential concern, but it may not be the one that causes us to spin out of control,
Okay.
at least temporarily.
And while we're talking about DHHS and those sorts of things, I do want to make just a general note to the public. Quarantining is not a suggestion. It's a requirement. It's a public safety requirement. And so if you have been told that you were in quarantine, you do need to be aware that the state does have the power of enforcement with quarantining, including up to having those who ignore a quarantine directive to be arrested. And I would really not want that to go to that extent. But please understand that those quarantines are important to protect your family and also the families around you. So if you've been directed to quarantine by DHHS, it is a thing. It is a thing that matters. And your students will not be allowed to return to school until we have the release from quarantine certificate from DHHS. That will come to you typically via email, and that needs to come to us. DHHS has told us that we need to require that certificate for your student to return if your student has been quarantined per DHHS.
Okay, so I get a couple things. That may be the case, but we are not the enforcement agency.
We are not, no, we are not.
And if they're going to make this enforcement requirement regarding this form, are they actually going to be able to get it out and get it to us in a timely manner based upon some of the lack of performance in other areas?
Well, that's a good question, and I have had that conversation, a few hours ago. What I will say is I've been told that because the dates sometimes shift because of additional positives that may happen in a household that I don't know about.
Right.
I need to have that certificate so I know that that individual is cleared to come back in. And so I've been told that those are being sent out by DHHS, and the student should have it upon return. So I am following up with them to clarify exactly what the timing is on that, because that does raise some questions with me. Some of the responses I've gotten from DHS have been very, very prompt, and others not so much so.
I mean, my concern is if we have a family that has an exposure and they go through the process, they go to 2 weeks, it falls on say that the 14-day quarantine falls on a Thursday. They're done Thursday. They're trying to get their students back to school on a Monday. Or say it falls on a Wednesday. And then DHHS doesn't get back to us for 4 or 5 days.
They're not going to get to us. They will give the certificate to the family. The family will then give us a copy or show it to us. DHHS is not sending those certificates to us. They are sending them to the families.
So how do we know that that's
New?
Maybe.
Feels new.
How do
Yeah. Well, this is the first I've had students returning, so.
how do we know that DHHS quarantined a person?
Because I am in contact with our case manager, and she gives me a list of these are the students that you have who have been sent to quarantine.
Okay.
So I know who I'm looking for certificates back
So
from.
if that is the case, wouldn't it be easier for us to get the same list back, releasing them from quarantine, so that we don't put that?
Burden back on the families.
Burden back
I would
on the
agree.
family.
And I'm happy to suggest that to
Yeah.
them, because there's a line list that goes by secure database to them. It certainly would make sense to go back and say, released, released, released. I can ask.
Or a release date, even if,
Well, and the dates, they're not going to tell me probably until the day of release, because they are subject to change if someone else in the
Right.
family becomes positive. And I'm not necessarily privy to that information. I only have on my students. So,
there's just got to be a better way of doing it.
Amen.
And again, I think particularly with the schools, this is newness to them.
right.
And if we have to communicate it to a different office to get it done right, I'm not opposed to doing that either.
And
I would
nor
agree
am I.
with Tim that we should ask, see if they
Yep.
can send that to us, but also I would like you to monitor the time.
I
So
have
that if
been.
you have a case, or a student, or a parent, and all of a sudden it gets to be 14 days, 17 days, and you get a call from the parent that says, we'd like to send our student back to school, we've gone through the quarantine period, and all of a sudden you're saying, we haven't got anything back from the state. I'd like to be alerted to that because
Absolutely.
I don't want
No.
that situation to get worse. And if we as a board need to push up the ladder
Yep,
to say, hey, you're making these requirements and you're not following through.
this is a problem. No.
We're getting ready to say, we don't really gonna follow your rules here if you can't be back to us. Because if someone says 21 days and you have no reason why you haven't released this person to come back to
Right.
school,
Right.
then we've got a problem.
No, I have a
Yeah.
book with all of my contacts and the dates and the times of, okay, this person should be at this
Right.
point, this person should be, and some of those dates do shift. I got news today that I had two that the dates actually became earlier because they had additional information that backed up the time. So
Yeah,
it's almost in constant flux, which is the very, very frustrating part of this whole thing. And being able to communicate with those who need to know, not necessarily everybody who wants to know.
right. I mean, the thing is, they're expecting us to do all our job. Well, sitting here, I'm expecting them to do their job. So when they're
Absolutely.
not doing their job, you let us know, and we'll see what we can do about that.
Will do.
Because we'll have no problem picking up the phone, even if it's just pestering the same people that you're pestering, and they're just giving you lip service.
We can
Because
pester a bunch.
we, cooperation works both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they're government organizations, sometimes they feel they operate on their own time. But I think that their bosses work on the same time as we do. Facilities.
So, construction updates?
The roof is starting for here,
Yep.
for the high school, and then obviously when they're done there, be back to Henry Wilson. Construction on the Henry Wilson Middle School has been pushed back to the week after next. They haven't finished.
Starting the 19th, is that correct?
Yes. That's the date they've given me recently because they've fallen behind on their current project that they're working on. But once they're here, it's all hands on deck. So he's going to give me a better idea today. He's going to have a better idea when that job's going to end that he's on now, and he'll let me know once that happens, which is supposed to let me know this week. But as of the end of last week, he was avoiding my phone calls and my emails because he probably didn't have a date for me. So
And now he's returning your calls?
he's giving me a little bit of information. So,
Dangling a string.
yeah,
Let us know if it doesn't improve.
I'll
Absolutely.
let you know.
I guess under facilities, where do we stand? I know Larry's not here.
I
but
don't
where-
have Larry tonight.
But where do we stand as far as our answering our cleaning requirements as far as personnel and contract?
As of this morning, I did not have any other information from the contractor who was supposed to be getting that stuff
What
back to
about
Larry.
applicants for part-time positions?
Applications, I haven't seen those come across to me at this point.
Have we had any?
I don't believe I've had applicants on that part. I see what Larry sees come across through. I haven't seen them. If I've missed them, it's not been many. Because every applicant that comes through for the district hits my email, and I do check them.
Can we post the open positions that we have a priority in filling on the SAU district Facebook page?
Sure.
So then we can get those shared out to some of the other groups. And, again, part of the problem that'll correct is our local people aren't going on ed jobs to look for a custodian position.
Right.
But they may know somebody that might consider doing the position.
Right.
If we get the word out within our other means of communication.
Happy to post those.
So that brings up a question I had. Notifications from the school district. Do we have like a listserv that people can subscribe to for RFP, job postings, so forth, like the town does? Because I'm on it for the town, where I see any bid or auction items or employment opportunities, do we have a listserv for any notifications that come out as far as employment, bids or anything like that?
Not in that form. We do have a list of vendors who have asked to be notified if something is posted, but it's not a formal listserv.
There's also some, a lot of websites out there that they send their bots out and search for all these RFPs.
Right, but if we had
Yeah.
a listserv that people could subscribe to, say a resident wants to subscribe to employment opportunities, or I think in the town side, they do everything. So if you subscribe to it, you'll see,
Everything that they put out.
Minutes, agendas, meetings.
right,
Okay.
you'll see if they're gonna auction off a old fire truck, or a sealed bid, or they're gonna have RFP for paving, or,
Right.
so that if we have that, subcontractors could subscribe to that just to catch the RFPs. Other people could subscribe to it to catch auctions. Other
I
people
will look
could-
into it.
But it might be simple that people would subscribe because they want to know what the school is putting out.
I think that was Jen.
Jen?
Yeah, this is Jen Loudon. That's something I can easily set up if you'd like it. I can set up through our web platform and plus our Google Groups. I can set up either way.
Yeah, I'm just putting it out there. Maybe Ruth Ellen can look into it to see what makes sense for her. Maybe could talk to Arthur saying what do they do? It comes by email, which is, I think, probably appropriate. So you would just get email of what they're putting out. I subscribe to it to town because, I don't always look at the stuff, but if I see something, to put it in an RFP, well, I can at least click on it and go to the link and pick it up.
Sure.
So,
Okay. Jen, you and I can talk about that tomorrow.
Just going back to that thought process, and I know Arthur's out for a couple of days, but if we could email Arthur that posting that you put on our Facebook page, ask them if they'd consider putting out a mail blast. Again, it's another way of reaching our citizens, like Charlie, that aren't on social media that would see that.
Yeah, and I've got Arthur's number. He's good
Right.
about
Yeah.
answering.
So,
but I don't know, and it would be good to ask him what he has for subscription numbers to that. I'd be curious.
Okay.
I'm on it. I've been on it since they put it out.
So we know he's got at least one.
He got at least one.
the numbers got better. I want to say they were around 200, but I think they've picked up.
I'd be curious because I think if we do that, just like in the job postings, if somebody were to subscribe to it just for curiosity as a parent, and then saw them posting for a janitor, saw the posting, they could say, hey, I know somebody that might be looking for it, and then you
Yep.
can help get the word out.
Absolutely.
Right?
Okay,
And-
sounds good.
And they saw the posting, I don't know anything about it, but it's on the SAU website.
Right.
So I assume that we're putting that stuff in an open forum on our website, SAU, as far as RFQs, job postings. I didn't go and check, but I should have.
That's all right.
Anything else on facilities?
I don't believe so. Okay.
Okay, moving along to budget priorities. First one is curricula.
And so, 2 weeks ago, you had asked for kind of a list of priorities because you were looking to put out some goals or generalities around these. And then last week, discussion kind of circled back around. There was a question as to whether or not we were looking at a true workshop. That kind of got pushed over here. Some other discussion happened, but I wanted to circle back and just double check and see if there were specific goals that the board was looking to give here, or if this is something that you're looking for us to bring to you, because we kind of talked around it and then went to
As
the next
curriculum?
thing. As far as because these were the areas that you'd mentioned that were priorities as you were discussing those as general
Well,
terms.
I can start. I think far as we had already planned to do some outreach events regarding curriculum. Far as, and I think that's one item.
So when you say outreach events, so
That was basically our,
like the design,
right.
the strategic design event?
I mean,
Okay.
that has a budget impact that I think.
Of
that-
course, yeah.
That this board has approved.
Yep,
For me, that's it. One of them, for me, also curriculum is staff. Misty may have, these are the things that we want to implement in our curriculum this year, which are, say, add, as far as cost to the base operating cost, and what
Okay.
are those?
okay,
I don't know what those are.
all right,
I mean, it might be whether it's hardware, software, training, events, what are those? And why we should consider them.
okay, yep,
That's what my thoughts. Tim?
There was conversations, and I'm trying to think of the correct acronym, but basically like a learning management system that we were going to have to
That-
license to go on with the strategic plan. So
Subscription cost.
that should go
Okay.
into to that particular,
$6,000?
yeah.
oh, Empower is gonna be a whole lot more than that, Yeah.
Some numbers.
So
okay,
any other area coming from the staff where they believe will increase or impact the way we deliver education to our children. Let's look at where our base point is, what else we can offer to improve that base point, and how we're going to evaluate that base point on whether it's effective or not of improving our education.
Because it may be, say there's 5 things that fall onto this topic. We've talked about a couple of them, but say there's 5 items. If we don't feel as a board we can fund all those 5, we've got to pick the ones that we feel are the most most beneficial.
absolutely,
So, and that's going to take some education of us and information to us. And I think that's where we need to start, because it may be
Fair enough.
different, some things we may be doing already. And if it's tried and true, this is what we're doing in our curriculum, that's in our base, that's fine. That's that's the base budget. But if these things are additional, and because this is where we want to go, but these are the cost impacts, we need to consider those carefully, so that if we've got to pick and choose on a where we feel the taxpayer can support, we want to make sure we get the best bang for the buck, and not just say, that's too much money, we'll go with the cheap stuff.
right,
We want to go with the most value, and be able to justify it, because when we go to the ballot box, if we do our job correctly, the taxpayer will be informed enough, if they choose to be, to make an informed decision. And we want to be informed as possible as board members
so that you
to
can
propose the best decision based
Makes
upon
sense.
recommendations.
Okay, that helps,
And
thank
I
you.
think technology falls right along with that. Facilities, I know we had Larry's short list. I mean, that might be a good place to start.
Yeah, one of the things I want to add here is, the LED lighting, and we don't need to necessarily knock down pricing, but do we want a warrant article that authorizes us to enter into a lease contract for the LED lighting? That's one that made financial sense, where it's actually going to save us a little bit of
And that
money.
warrant article probably should be structured to be with no tax impact and financed over for the time period that it costs for the total payback. So say it's an 8-year payback. If we get authorized, say if the warrant article is to authorize us to enter into a lease purchase contract at no tax impact over the required life based upon return for savings, that may be sufficient. The board may choose at that point to go through, once we have the authorization, to go through a competitive bid process to do that, because in essence, why wouldn't we? I mean,
Well-
we could say, we just want to give it to this group, but if we have the authority to do it in a time, it would be reasonable to say, we're going to have an RFP, consider other potential vendors and make the best decision for the taxpayer.
Right.
And based upon the best package. I mean, we've looked at it already. We had some things we liked, some things we didn't like, but I still
Doesn't
think it
mean
should
you've
go.
seen it all yet.
I still think it needs to go back on a competitive bid because we may become more educated to find something that we like better than what we've seen so far. And if it's structured that way at a no impact basis, then I think we're reasonably likely to be awarded it. And I think that's a reasonable something that we could get funding for if it's in a 5 to 7, 8 year period and not add to the tax base, because next year might also be a difficult tax year.
We have some things to talk about, yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I didn't want to interrupt you on it, but
The other area that I was going towards, and I don't know how we pursue this, it may be a committee. The town at one time contracted a lease of land for a solar project. The district has an awful lot of land. Is that an area for revenue that we want to look at? Because the way the town's contract was structured in the beginning is bringing $130,000 a year in revenue, and it was going up from there. Plus, they were guaranteed an 8-cent per kilowatt electrical rate, which I'm sure is cheaper than we're paying. So my question is again, we don't have to go out price, we don't have to award contract. Do we want to ask the taxpayers, do you want to give the board the authority to enter into a long-term lease for the purpose of leasing space for, a solar plant? And picture it where it's not going to take away from our buildings and grounds and whatever. And we'd also have to research the safety because we have kids here. But I think that might be an answer to how we want to accomplish some of our building projects. If we use that revenue come in, maybe a revolving fund, so that we have to complete, this this heating system or this roofing project, we're accomplishing all that without taxpayer money input.
I mean, one approach is to consider that, is to use that, if you were to enter into that revenue, to offset direct utility expenses. I was on this Board of Selectmen when they negotiated that, and, we made the best effort possible, but based upon some of the delays, I'm not opposed to it, but I would certainly look to take a second look at it with some, what would you do different? Because at this point, the town entered into contract, and that's yet to come to fruition based upon things out of our control, and I don't know if they have the safeguards in place without going through the contract to say, you guys either get it done or you're out. Especially with the commitment. I mean, they did negotiate some long-term energy savings in, but there was also substantial time commitment. I believe it was 20 plus 5 plus 5, and those were at option of their option, not our option. So there's a long-term commitment.
Yeah.
As far as safety, I think they installed them, they provided all the maintenance and fencing. So that's an opportunity we can certainly look at.
And for us, we would need to look at clearing land as well, because pretty much what we have cleared
I think we would
is in
just,
use.
we would just put that on them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something we don't need to be in the business in. In the cost of the installation, that's a pretty small component.
Right.
If we were to enter into that, I mean, there's certainly something to consider. We could seek authorization by the taxpayer to consider it.
Right. And we need to look, because a lot of our uncleared land is wetland, so.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly solicit some opportunities to see if something that they would want to look at. They could look at the site and say, yes, not conducive, or these are concerns. I know there was a big push, but I think that I did it, it's funny because I was at the Board of Selectmen meeting at the start of the last meeting, and I asked them, what's the status on this? And the answer was, well, it got delayed, and their answer was some of the investors pulled out because of the concerns after COVID or whatever. I mean, it's a pretty, when they came in, it was like, okay, this is in the bag, this is we've got all these people lined up, to give us all this money, and it was based upon a guaranteed rate of return or expected rate of return that if didn't come to fruition, because there's a lot of numbers that are in flux, installation costs, material cost, because all these materials are made not in the United States, that all of a sudden the numbers don't work, the investors go, if I don't get my 9%, and the number was 9%. So they were getting pretty much, the people that were putting up the money were going to get pretty much guaranteed 9% rate of return. That's a pretty high on a 25-year note. That if they don't, they just said, well, we're not going to do it for that. So if the numbers don't work, then all of a sudden we enter into a contract. We've got our hands tied on our hand behind our back. They don't come through.
We're stuck.
Contractually, what's our concern? I'm not saying it's not doable.
So learning from
Yeah.
what happened with the town, then when we,
I mean, they may
when
be
we
fine.
enter into,
The town may be fine as far as they've given a time to say, you don't come through in a certain time, you're out.
right. But contractually, we can learn from their experiences.
Yeah.
And sew up a lot of those loopholes. And I'm not saying it's something we want to do, but
Could explore.
we can explore it if we have the taxpayers' permission to do it, but don't waste the time if they're not going to give it to us, is kind of where I'm headed in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're certainly going to have some warrant articles that it's typically a little bit different than what they're used to seeing from this board. Maybe not. I mean, maybe we have a usual bus fare, bus and technology and,
I suspect that this is going to be the year of the warrant article, having talked to, with the CIP committee. I think both town and school are looking at putting more pieces directly to warrant article and letting the voters decide what they want to do with it.
Are you talking a PPA on the solar power purchase agreement? Is that what the town was trying to go into, or?
I
'Cause
think,
that's how you get all the tax breaks, because you can't get a tax break as a school district or a town because you don't pay taxes.
Yeah, it wouldn't be our project.
Right.
They would simply lease our land, so it was put through as a long-term lease.
they were doing
So
two
you
components.
didn't own the panels.
No.
You were just leasing.
We were just.
Leasing the land to the company to operate their business.
In some ways, we were doing in one application that was a private one, it was a payment in lieu of taxes at a prorated value based upon the use. And the one that was adjacent to the landfill what the town owned, so that was more of a lease as far as revenue stream, plus a long-term discount on power. So it was really just a lease of the land plus a power agreement. And there was a couple different flavors. I think the town chose a locked-in rate versus a floating rate, which may have been a little bit different. So it's typically they're looking for, they were at like a 30-year. I mean, it might have been 20 plus 5 and 5, but that was their option. So their option guarantees they're going to be there because we don't have say. So. Moving on to staffing. I guess, what's your question?
Well, and this is probably going to be partly a non-public discussion later, but as we're looking at staffing, there were some positions that we had talked about last year, potentially shifting deeper than we had actually done. And I know that you had brought up, well, these were on the table last year. We definitely want to look at that. Just wanting to throw out there that we need to look at staffing differently this year than we did last year, because frankly, I have to look at my numbers and am I going to have to do social distancing? Hopefully not forever, but certainly I need to put that into the equation as I'm looking at how many people are where now. And as we're looking at what the needs are, does that change? It may not change a lot at some levels. At other levels, it may mean that we're looking at a different type of cap for a classroom, because if I have to say, okay, now I can't put 25 kids in a room anymore. What does that do to my staffing? The other piece, just as far as fixed costs, Brian had brought to you, I just want to make sure it's back out on the table. We are looking at a fairly sizable increase in retirement. And that's going to impact, just even if we don't do anything, if everything remains the same, that's going to be a pretty sizable chunk.
Is that 150,000, Brian? What was our prediction on retirement?
Oh, it's,
District-wide.
He's got it. The other piece is, as we're starting to do our preliminary numbers, Brian had put in, you'd thrown out kind of 6% on the health insurance just to kind of see what that looks like.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I'm hoping that it doesn't go that high, knowing it could go higher and it might be lower.
Yeah, I think that's what I saw on the private sector.
Yep.
That's the number I was looking at, where
Yep.
it was thrown in front of me.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that the state retirement system is, in some ways, just another unfunded mandate
It's
from
not
people
some ways
who
it is.
can't seem to manage money in a market that has been very good for the last few years.
well, it was very flush at one point.
Yeah.
Well, till the state decided.
But the last couple of years, they've done well.
Yeah.
The last 2 or 3 years, with their returns, they've been up.
But they
But
can't,
they're
they
still,
can't go too
but
risky
they're
if you
still
provide
pushing
policy.
more percent off to
Yep.
the towns. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just to-
more and more until basically they make it so
Ours.
that towns just say, we're not hiring people because it costs too much. It's just like in the construction business, when workman's comp goes too much to the roof, everyone goes, can't do it. It's too much of a number.
Retirement costs right now, going from this year to FY '22, you're looking at about $236,881 increase in retirement. That's the biggest cost driver we have. That's across the board, everybody.
What I've given you for estimates for our, well, it's not an estimate at this point, what we received for our October 1 adequacy aid, that will be what we are receiving payments on this year. And I did put another version in the financials in this week's packet. And I highlighted it's just that one page, and I highlighted the Farmington page, so it might make it a little bit easier to read. I also have it in print form if you need it, for those of you who are in person.
Like this. There's only a couple
it's-
numbers on it.
It's, yours is bigger than mine,
That's entire state.
so.
And I still got my readers on.
Looking at the yellow columns, those are this year only, and we are being told that they are one-time payments only. So if you look at the additional free and reduced aid, and then the fiscal capacity disparity aid, together those are approximately, it's almost $826,000. If those are one-time payments, that means that if we remove that from next year's adequacy, it's a drop of that much. Now, every year, there is some type of one-time payment that gets thrown in. This is a heftier one-time payment. Last year, it was the extra building funds monies that got put in as a $900-some thousand one-time payment. This is our $825,000 one-time payment, which is why, and I asked for clarification, they said, nope, that's just a one-time payment. But I will do a revenues projection based on worst-case scenario for the 19th. I will do an updated, the board had asked a few years ago that the first board meeting in December, that there is a revenues projection that is done. And at that point, I will have the November 15th projection for next year that comes out. I will send that to you, and I will work that into. I doubt that we're going to see the full 825 completely removed from next year's adequacy. That would be a fairly significant drop. but I'm curious to see what the state is going to give us as an adequacy estimate for next year, considering the revenues shortfalls that they are projecting. So I'm looking to give you kind of, here's based on the numbers that I have, and here's based on the next set.
Okay, my question is this: we have a tax setting coming up for this December tax bill. None of these revenues are going to impact December, correct?
Correct.
This is all on next.
This is all on next year.
Next fiscal year of the
Yes.
town, or next deliberative budget that we pass. So what I'm having a hard time seeing in here is within those revenue projections, what is up and what is down?
Okay. So if you look at the third column from the right, on,
I was actually looking at your memo.
okay, so last year, on November 15th, we were given an estimate of $6,900,760.04.
Yep.
And so this year, what we are told on October 1st that we're actually going to get payments based on is $6,769,222.72. So it's a difference of about $131,000.
Up or
Which-
down?
Down.
Okay.
Down. Which is not uncommon. The number that we get on November 15th is what we base the budget on. It's what I put in as, that's the number that I have to plug in for adequacy revenues as we build that number that goes to Article 3. So this is a little bit less than that. As we look at the revenues that we are returning to the town, it will more than offset that. So going into next year, I mean, we'd been told that we were facing a cliff because of the one-time $900,000 payments last year. The cliff isn't quite as much as it had been predicted to be. I suspect that it will be similar, although maybe not made up quite as much because of the other pieces coming forward. But we won't have that number until the 15th of November, which is why I do that final revenues projection before the board completely solidifies everything. While things will have gone forward to the budget committee for consideration, if revenues come in with a much more dire projection, there is still time for a correction of whatever you feel needs to happen before the budget hearings in January.
So with the preliminary numbers that went up to DRA on the MS 27,
MS 25.
25,
Yep.
there was about ballpark an $800,000 fund, which equates to, and that's our unexpended plus what we returned in the emergency fund. And that equates to, depending on how you move the decimal, a 42 to 43 cent per thousand reduction, if all's approved by DRA, when you use the new town net valuation.
The valuation is roughly 557.
Yeah, it went up, not much, but it went up slightly. So I've got that new number.
And you have the school, not the town.
And I
Yeah.
plugged it in, and it's the school one. It doesn't incorporate the Route 11 zone. So none of that is going to change for this year, correct?
It won't. It won't.
So we're still on track for that.
This is solely projecting toward next year. What this impacts is how we budget.
Okay.
And so, knowing that we are going into budget discussions, that's why I'm bringing this to you here.
So looking at the $131,000 number, because of
Saying that's the delta between the one-time payments and adequacy aid?
No, that's the delta between the amount that was estimated last November that we built budget on and what we're actually going to get this year.
Isn't that the same?
No, the
You
one.
said that we were gonna get an adequacy aid 100K less, and our one-time payments last year was 900,000, and now you're saying they're 860.
Okay, in that it roughly works out the same, but I think that's serendipitous rather than consequential, but go ahead.
No, that's what I was.
Yeah,
And my
but that
question
makes
is that where
sense.
you're getting it? You're getting it somewhere else.
It works that way, so we'll just leave it on the table. Yes.
I guess where my mindset is going is, because of COVID last year, we were allowed to carry significant amount of Title I over for an extra year.
We were allowed to carry over
200?
most of our grants. We were given an extra year to expend. Yes.
Can any of that money that we carried over into this fiscal year kind of offset some of the programs that we would have done with 131,000?
It can't,
I don't-
in that it's not allowed to supplant what we would have had in the budget. And this doesn't actually impact our budget, it impacts the tax rate. Because this is not saying that we will have $131,000 less coming into the district. This says that there's $131,000 more. Actually, I take it back when I said it wasn't going to impact the tax rate. The $131,000 would impact this current tax rate, but we have more than that that's coming back to the town. So there will be an offset.
So that
The
42 cent,
$825 hits next year.
so if the 121 is going to hit this year, it's on our revenue that was projected for the budget that we're in now,
Correct.
correct? Okay, so that's going to affect that 43 or 42 cent per thousand. It's going to be a lower number.
Right. But we are still returning more than the deficit is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, on the next item, you had other. Did you have some other, or that was just a
That was
placeholder?
just a placeholder.
Okay. So, any other questions regarding budget priorities for the board? 'Cause you-
I have no other questions.
Okay.
Does the board have questions for me?
I do on budget.
Okay,
and
go ahead,
it's just kind of housekeeping. Can we take the amended budget that went up to DRA because of the contract in the MS 25 and email those off with our financials to the budget committee so that they have them?
Sure.
Just for information.
They already have the
the other ones
financials,
because I got
but
them.
we can send the others that have gone up.
If we do them, and then, we'll just note at the meeting if there's any changes. Have we gotten any word back from DOE or DRA?
Not yet,
Okay,
other than received, thank you.
yep, okay.
Right on top. Calendar.
So just looking to see if there were any other changes that you were looking to make to the budget calendar, or leave it alone for now.
Say leave it alone.
Okay? Easy enough, done.
So you gave us the revenues update already.
That was just on this piece of the adequacy.
Okay.
So
Go ahead
when I
with
do
the
the
rest.
revenues projection, I'll give you everything that I know at this point, and then I will give you projections on the unknowns, and then usually by December, some of those unknowns become a little bit more solid.
So you have anything for us tonight on that?
I don't, I'm just told you that
Okay.
you were gonna get it the 19th. Yep.
Okay. We dealt with old business as far as the Farmington 500 Club that was on the agenda. Do we have any other old business
Blood
from
drive.
members?
The
Blood
one thing
drive.
I have is blood drive up at the
Blood
top for the
drive.
next. Back in the spring, the National Honor Society held its blood drive downtown at the town hall, the old town hall, because our facilities were closed. They have a blood drive that is tentatively scheduled right now for the 13th of November. I reached out to Arthur to see if that space would be available again. The selectmen have put some conditions in place for its use.
Such as?
Their conditions are that there would need to be a faculty member there at all times to monitor, open, and close the building. I don't see that that should be an issue. If the guidance on the incubation period changes for COVID, we would need it cleaned if the town needs it before the end of the incubation period based on CDC guidance. it's that part that might be the issue for us, because we certainly don't have, having a professional cleaning service budgeted, and as our own staffing is a little bit strapped, I don't have staff that I could go in and say.
Would we
"Let's
be
get out
better
of
off
that."
doing it here?
Well, the problem is that they typically run from 1 to 6. I use the and they have to start setting up usually by about 10:30. The gym is used for cafeteria space. I don't have the gym as a full facility for them to use anymore.
Do we know how many people the blood drive services?
It's varied. I can go back and find out what the numbers were from March. I don't remember.
I'm just curious finding that number and maybe reach out to
April.
Friends of Farmington. They've got a phenomenal facility on the second floor that's got a lot of space.
They might be able to use the first floor also, because we
Okay.
haven't really been having much utilization of the space.
Okay. Because second floor might be an issue
Right.
with
Yeah, okay, but
access. So,
And the only other thing, as far as a requirement, the first one, I would just say, if we were to use their space, we would ask them to, or have, because it just has a faculty member
yeah.
or a school board member. Because, say, faculty couldn't be there, I mean, I
Yeah.
needed a volunteer, one of us could do it.
Yeah, or I could do too. So
I
yeah, we
mean-
can take shifts. Yeah.
And I think, when I watched the meeting, I think basically what they were saying is, I think it's a 72-hour quarantine period that if the building's not cleaned, anything in there is dead. And I think that was their intent. But I think in the event of an emergency, shelter or whatever, they wanted that to say,
Right.
if something has to happen before the 72 hours, we're responsible for the
For cleaning it.
I think it's,
that may be a risk.
Emergency shelter is here anyway. So
And that risk might be something we're willing to take,
right.
knowing what the downside is. If the downside is, if an emergency happens, what is the number going to be? Is it going to be 3,000, 5,000? What's it going to be?
or do we send our
I
fogging
would say
machines
it's
over
it's
there?
probably not going to be more than what they paid for this space, because this was a bigger space. And certainly, in an emergency, we can fire up the electrostatics and get down there if we had to.
But the participation would be a good number, because if it's a small number, they may be able to find other space to do the same thing. Or it may be not worth doing at all. I mean, unless they say if it was really down and there was 10 people,
Right.
or what was the
It
participation?
sounded like what they had for participation made it such that the Red Cross was looking to repeat here
Yeah, they're low.
in November. So when I stopped in, they had been consistently busy, because they're doing most things now by appointment rather than drop-ins. So they know pretty much right out of the gate how many they're going to be having coming in.
Yeah, so you're going to get back to us on that,
Okay.
right? I mean, unless you need them, I'm all for doing it, but we need to know what the downside is.
I would say the downside is that we'd have to clean it if we get into an emergency,
And I think we can do that in-house, if we had to.
if we had to.
So, I mean, I'm okay with doing that, with the one clarification of, our school board, supervising the facility. And if we have to clean it, then we twist Larry's arm and tell him he's got to work 90 hours instead of 80.
Well, worst case, we got to pay somebody.
Right.
Is that your motion?
Yeah.
I'll second. Any discussion? Josh or Stan?
No, I'm fine.
Not hearing any discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I got two old businesses.
Yeah, no old business. What do you have?
We talked about Kathy Severs getting paid for the 3 times when she was deputy treasurer, that those checks were supposed to go out. They haven't. Can we get those done?
Oh, yeah.
And have the election checks going out, or is there a timeline on the election checks going out?
We have heard from the moderator. I don't believe we've gotten invoice from,
Do we need are they an elected official?
Election checks, could you,
So the moderator gets a check, the school clerk gets a check,
from us.
Yes.
from us for the election.
Because it was a special election that we took part in. So typically, I get something that's the
But we don't,
receipt.
we're elected officials and we don't bill.
True.
So they're an elected official. I would say get the IRS forms that you need them to file, and then you just cut the checks and get them out, because
Will do.
under, a stipend is technically an expense, and after 30 days, we're violating labor law.
I mean, the other thing is, typically are those done, you're requiring, like, you need a, what do they call it, not a, what's it, before?
W-4.
W-4. Yeah.
But for a type of position, couldn't we just 1099 them? Which is, we just make the payment, taxes are on them as a subcontractor.
I
It's a-
think it's cleaner for us to keep it the same form, but I'm pretty sure we already have one on file for each.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's the issue. We should be fine. We
Right.
just got it.
Because what would happen if you had somebody that acted as an elected official and they don't ever get you a W-4, you're still required to pay them, so you would have to probably
Well,
do it on a 1099.
But you need a 1099 form before you could pay them under a 1099. So either way, you're filing a
The
form.
auditors are going to be.
we need a form either way, so.
Anything over, I think it's $599.
Which
The
is under.
IRS. Yeah, this is under,
under.
so we wouldn't need them to file a form,
Right.
we could pay them.
So on the 1099, as long as it's $600, yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll get
I mean,
it.
I know we're talking big numbers here. What is it, $100, $125? I don't know.
I don't know. Let's get it done.
Anything else, Tim?
I'm good.
Anybody else with any old business? I know I had some, but I didn't bring it with me. I can't remember, so
And you didn't send it to me.
it wasn't that important, I guess. New business, donation acceptance by superintendent.
We had a donation that was given to Valley View of outdoor seating. And I have the amount. It was, I want to say 207. I need to go back and look at that. I have the number written down.
$207?
Yes. It was donated for the library for outdoor seating. And I am accepting that on behalf of the district. It's within the $500 purview for us to do, with thanks to our donor, Mr. Brown.
Did we thank them in writing?
I did. I got an actual card.
Oh, good.
It was very nice.
Well, I think I'm glad we did, because it's important.
It is important.
It takes just a few minutes, but it's,
It matters.
yep. So I want to thank the donor for that donation for outside seating, whoever they might be. Anything else on the new business? So we have last on our agenda before non-public session, we have public participation. So I'll leave it open for a minute or two. I think there's manifest signing, no?
No, just a contract.
It's the contract.
Oh, that's right, yes.
Oh.
Their board reports, and also the financials if there are any questions. So let's back up and start
Yes.
with, since Diana jumped in, we'll let her
Yeah.
go first.
I know she gave a report, I printed it out. Go ahead, Diana. I think I did.
So a short one this evening. I gave you caseload numbers. I anticipated that you would probably want them. Over on the left-hand side in that margin, you see a note that we have one case manager that is covering both grade kindergarten and first grade. And then I give you kind of a stipulation of the numbers that you see. For instance, in fifth grade, there are 14 students that are in our district. In addition, there's a child at a charter school and a child in an out-of-district placement. So as you read that, that will give you some information in terms of what it looks like in our building and then what we see outside. My apologies. And I also include that we have a number of students who are aging out or will graduate at the end of this school year. So obviously we'll see an impact in terms of budget when we get to that discussion. So an update regarding the emergency order number 48 from Governor Sununu, which was that within the first 30 days of students returning back into the school district, all families with special education students should have an IEP meeting, or at least be offered an IEP meeting that they could then choose to have later, or they could choose to waive it. And since the start of school, we've had 143 IEP meetings, and we've had many more just today. And we're really happy that we're approaching the end of this. It's been wonderful to see the families, talk to them, see the kids that are participating remotely. But I've got to give a big thank you to the special education staff, because even an IEP meeting that takes 30 minutes, it takes 90 minutes to produce the paperwork that goes up to it, and then to get the documentation that goes out thereafter. Longer if it's an evaluation planning meeting, or if it happens to be an IEP meeting. So the results of all these meetings is the majority of families were very, very happy with what was going on. We had some minor corrections that we made. We had 22 IEP amendments that we put in place. A large part of those were for amending information should we go remote, and making sure that those IEPs recorded the services that we intended to provide in a remote setting. I think in some cases we put in place a once a week 15-minute check-in for a student, things like that. But the majority of the meetings were really, really positive, and we had a wonderful time checking in with everybody. And I've got to thank our staff, because they've been going furiously at a busy time of year. The beginning of the school year is very busy for special education, as it is for all teachers. Attendance, truancy, educational neglect. Just a reminder to parents, your children are required to attend school between the ages of 6 and 18. So friendly reminder regarding that. If you've chosen to homeschool your child, we need a letter from you stating that.
And it needs to come to my office.
Yes, please. We have had some parents, we've gone to visit them because we have not received a homeschooling letter, and we hate to waste your time and create any kind of stress and anxiety. So please, if that's your intention, we always ask you to let us know in advance. To date, there have been 3 home visits for Valley View, a home visit for Henry Wilson, and 3 home visits for the high school. Just a reminder that the process does end with a call to DCYF to report the child is truant, and then we proceed from there whether the call is screened in or not. So please, extra vigilance in getting to school. And again, moving on to the options, all in or remote. It's like Ruth Ellen read my board report. We're going to talk about some of the same things. Students, we appreciate students making it to school. We love that so many of them are here and in attendance. It's a real organizational challenge when they all of a sudden decide they're going to show up remotely, especially if you're a special education student. We've had a few that parents haven't even called in. The kids have just decided to be remote on that given day. And we love that they're getting here. However, that creates some challenges. We need to then find a way to meet with that child during a time where we had not anticipated having an extra child online. Some students aren't as adept at Google Classroom, so it takes some extra time to kind of get them up to speed. So then we're working on getting them organized online, only to have them come back in a day or two. So that is something we've been seeing. We would like parents to work with us to make sure that kids are, if they've said they're going to be in, they're in. And if they're out because they're sick, they're sick. And we are expecting that they are getting back to us in terms of creating a plan for getting the work done. Just a reminder to wear your mask. And then another suggestion about quarantining. We have seen some children that we know have been asked by DHHS out in the park playing as if they have not been asked to quarantine. So we would respectfully ask them to quarantine and to have their parents keep them inside. And that is the report for the beginning of the school year. Any questions you may have?
I think if we see that occurring, and we know these are our students that are subject to quarantine, a phone call to the emergency medical management
is
office or the
happening.
fire chief, so that those communications are going throughout the town. My other question, Diana, at one time, I think we were looking at, in our entire student population, a number of possibly 20 students that were truant. I don't know whether that's still a good number or not, but can we, on your monthly reports, maybe kind of get a vision of what that truancy
Sure.
rate looks like during what part of the year, or what we may have to do, if anything, that will help you in that process?
Sure.
Because that's an awful lot of work
It is a lot of work.
for your office to go through on what we need. And, part of that solution, we've got a state rep on the education committee, and may want to have conversations to change some of that process.
I mean, I know there are school districts, Rochester being one of them, that fines parents.
Yep.
When we get to court, that is certainly something we can do, but that usually only happens when the child has been found in violation of a conditional release. But I think there are some school districts that impose it sooner than that.
So is that our current truancy caseload, 20?
No,
Okay.
no. It starts over again once we start the new school year. So at this time, we have a couple of students that started on truancy petition, but then other things occurred, a delinquency. So for instance, we have 2 students that continue in process in court. They began as a truancy petition, but they have moved since then to something more significant. So those are the 2 that I have court involved at this
So then
time.
truancy just becomes kind of a mitigating factor that's brought along, but it's not the reason they're in court.
Well,
Now, what was our caseload last year for truancy?
We had 20 kids that we were actively working with in terms of we'd had meetings, we'd been to the home, we were having conversations with them, we'd put, interventions in place to get them into school. Of course, once remote learning started, that looked very different. DCYF was not taking calls or reports about students who were not showing up for remote learning.
'Cause that's 2.5%.
Yep. We got a lot of kids that don't go to school.
And you're expecting this year to be similar, or worse?
I'm expecting it to be worse, to be honest. It's going to be harder. It's more of a challenge, especially if you have kids that are popping in and popping out. Like they're coming in physically, and we're expecting them there, but then they show up remotely, and then, everybody's
they're
like,
remote
okay,
for
well, no,
one
I thought it was
class.
remote. No, he's in the classroom. It's like, so it becomes, becomes a little bit of a shell game. Our staff has been fantastic. Our guidance counselors, especially Katie Sauer and Kate O'Brien, our new guidance counselor, have been great about really being right on top of getting parents with meetings and pulling them in.
So that's where our first wave of dealing with this at the guidance counselor.
Correct. Yep. So it starts with, the process starts with, we send letters home. Then we're required to have a meeting. We're required to do a home visit. And until we do all of those things, or we can't file truancy. We can't call it into DCYF. And even when we call it into DCYF, if it's a child that's under the age of 12, they will file it as educational neglect. Well, because it's the parent's responsibility to get the kid there. So with educational neglect, it requires a certain percentage of the days be missed. And I can't remember, I believe last year it might have been 50% of the days had to be missed by the student before they would file this as an educational neglect case. So that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time.
Diana,
Yes.
Stratford County created a diversion program where one of our, I think he's a retired DCY, juvenile service officer, is now running the county program under Lieutenant Callahan. Have they reached out to us and had communications with them? Because I would think truancy would be something that they may be able to help us with.
Yeah, once a student gets assigned a juvenile probation officer, a JPPO, then they'll do the diversion part, but it doesn't happen until the case, the case is
So they're
screened
not
in.
they're not doing any pretrial diversion?
No,
Okay,
no.
that's too bad.
No. And DCYF, frankly, is, they'll push back unless we've done all the pieces we need to do, because they're very busy as well. So we need to really be on our game, and we've been doing a nice job. Principals have been really helpful, and like I said, guidance counselors have been amazing, so.
I'd like to know, in the monthly report, what is the amount of time that what is the amount of time we're spending on the truancy problem? Because the answer may be, and I don't want to go in that direction, I want to see the kiddos get services, but the answer may be, we may have to fine some of these parents to bring these kids into school. Don't want to go in that direction, but it may be something over the course of time that we have to look at. Because we're spending significant money. Let mom and dad pay significant money if they can't get their child into school. One of the reasons you're talking, just so you can understand the process, is, truancy or a CHINS process is a very difficult process, the way the system's set up to get a child's services. So what ends up happening is once that child commits a crime, they put them in as a delinquency so that they can get those services to the kid. And it's sad that the system has to work that way, but that's the way it's working. But I'd be curious to watch those numbers, because I have no problem going to the selectmen to potentially ask them to file a town ordinance on truancy and start finding parents if that's what it takes to get our kids in school. I don't want to spend $50,000 in salaries per year babysitting kids that aren't coming in school.
Yeah, I mean, and to the parents' credit, I mean, in some cases, we have kids that just simply are refusing, in which case the parents then can file a CHINS, and I've told a couple of parents how to do that, so.
And the other issue, there's always discretion in how we handle those type of cases, and obviously I'd be looking at that as a last resort, but 20 students or 2.5% is a higher number than I'd like to see.
We agree.
Absolutely.
But let us know if we can help.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Moving along, I think. is
Misty has.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. So you should have my board report in there, but I'm just going to highlight just two things. Keep it simple. The rest, I think, is self-explanatory. So the first thing I wanted to highlight is we're getting started on our learning progression work, and I'm meeting with Henry Bolton's staff October 7th and Valley View and FHS on the 21st shortly. Just to kind of give an overview of the options for the process and get the staff's feedback and answer any of their questions. I've put a lot of materials out there for them to look at, to study, and then I'm going to have them take a power vote on which way they want to approach this year, but I want to get started on that with them because I think it certainly is helpful in our current times and certainly is a foundational structural piece for future things that we need to do. So I should have an answer around that in my next board report, but I wanted you to know that we are getting on that and we're starting to really look at that kind of a structural shift. And on my new website that's for the staff, which you have access to, there's a lot of things up there already that you could actually, as board members, take a look at if you're interested. And I did put the link to that on my board report so you could easily access that. The other thing I wanted to mention, just because we're in the midst of planning our strategic design, and we've met several times, Diana, Ruth Ellen, and I with Linda Laughlin, and starting to shape that plan. I have, and I know Ruth Ellen in the last meeting, I think, gave you a link for the stakeholder spreadsheet for you to be able to add people.
And I resent it again today. I resent that again today, so it's at the top of their inbox.
And I have created a brochure, registration links, and a short PR video. So we need to think about how to get maybe those things out. And then we just really need to start pounding the pavement for participants. But I created those PR materials, hopefully to help you as you talk to people, and hopefully we can find different places to get those out so that people can have an opportunity to kind of get a sense of what it is, and we can start making calls to get people to come. So I just put that on the report, and I wanted to make mention of that tonight, just so that that gets out there. And the dates are November 12th, 13th, and 14th. And we are going to do it fully digital at this point because we don't know what anything's going to look like then. So we're planning for fully digital event. And so that's there, and super excited about that, but we still have a lot to do. And so those are the two things I really wanted to highlight tonight. So if you have any questions, of anything else on the board report as well, but of those two things, I'm certainly happy to answer them.
What's learning progression work?
So that's a curriculum structure where we unpack our standards and put them into instructional goals from developmental levels from early elementary through high school and into scoring scales that will ultimately be able to be used to quantify mastery of instructional goals from the standards. So it's a fairly common curriculum structure. It's kind of like the shopping list of what we need kids to learn at each developmental level and makes that very clear and transparent to people, which is not something we have in this district right now, and it really is helpful to have this so that we can make a lot better decisions about curriculum resources. We stay targeted and focused on the things that we want kids to master so that we don't try to do too much and master nothing. That kind of a structure really does get high impact in student achievement ultimately when it's fully functional and has all the systems around it. So it's really basically getting our shopping list of what we need kids to learn at each developmental level to master.
Got it. And what's a power vote?
So that's once the teachers really have time to really think and look through that, what I will do is put out an actual voting tool, and all the teachers will vote on what they want for an option in terms of a process that they would like to either build those out from scratch or choose a model that is already built that we have access to that they could edit to meet the needs of Farmington. So what I will do is get a vote from every single teacher so that we have that data and we know where they stand before we make our decision.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Charlie?
Go ahead, Tim.
Misty, Tim Brown, in the form for the strategic development, I was hoping we had our meeting tonight because one of the questions I was going to ask the Board of Selectmen is, would you want to assign a representative to the committee? And the second group that's in town that I think strategic development would have an impact on is our economic development committee as well. And that meeting didn't happen tonight, so I wasn't able to ask those questions, and I understand you're on the timeline. But can we get from the district invitations out to both those groups?
And I guess my question is, would you want the whole committee or?
Just a representative from the committee to make it simple.
And so certainly we can do that way, or there are key people who have expressed interest in being part of, that some of them I already have on the list, and that's partly why I wanted to triangulate lists with you to see who you were thinking, so we can compare that.
Yeah, you could ask that question, but we could also put them on our list, personally.
Absolutely, right.
Yeah, so that's the point of that spreadsheet, Tim, though, is if there's specific people that we should contact, we actually have formal invitation for people already set up, and we just need the names and contact information of those people. And also, I think it's important, for example, if you have true relationships with some of these people that, a personal phone call really can help if you have specific names of people you think would be really good to get to the table. I find that really does get more strategic people at the table than just sort of putting it out there and hoping they say yes. So that if you can get them, and all of us as administrators are happy to contact them, but they don't know who I am necessarily, so it might be better for some of these people to come from you.
But they need to know who you are, Misty.
Well,
they do, yes.
and
but
certainly they, through
they may
this
not
and that.
accept it from me necessarily because they don't know me, but I'm happy to contact you, so don't think I'm shirking my duty in that, but if I know the names and have contact information, I'm happy to reach out, for sure.
So I'm looking at this list now, Misty, so when I'm looking at this list, so I'm going to put on John Doe, and then I'm going to go over and I'm going to check the boxes that I feel are appropriate, as far as whether they're board, business leader, local state government, nonprofit, retired,
And that's,
law enforcement, and you guys are going to say, okay, these are the, but some of these people that we put on this list may fall into a bunch of those categories?
Exactly, and we expect that. But
Yeah.
we're looking at wanting to make sure that we don't end up with a list that is 95% parents of students who are in this district with no voices outside that. So that's why we're looking to see what categories of stakeholders we have. And there may be some other categories that you say, you know what, you completely missed this, please add it. But we're looking
Yeah,
to
so-
make sure that we have broad representation of the community, not just the people who are in Power School on our quick list.
Right, I mean, the one thing is that if I fill out this list and I check some of these boxes, it may not be complete because of my knowledge of that person.
Absolutely.
The person could be a veteran and I'm not aware of. They could also be,
It's not a quiz.
yeah, you know,
It's
so-
it's a framework, that's all.
And the other thing too about that, just so that you know, also, you know, in any community, there could be someone who's a really, a community leader or a business person in town, but it's also a parent. But one of the things we want to consider when we're putting is what group do we want them to represent? Because that's also helpful when we get closer to the process, because we then put these people in groups based on their expertise. And so if this person who's really got a thriving business in the community, we really might want them to be working around the economic piece, even though they might have kids in the system. So in thinking about things, even though they might fit several roles, it's helpful to think about what role we'd really like them to represent as well, because that helps us in the process. So just keep that in mind as well.
Misty, how many members do you see, or what would you like to see for an amount of members on the committee?
You mean in terms of the number of participants
Yeah.
that come?
Yep.
Yeah, I would love to see us get close to 100. I think that's a really good number, and really trying to get the 50-50 split of 50% sort of internal staff and 50%, parents, community, and all those different other stakeholder groups, trying to make sure that it's as balanced as we possibly can get it.
Okay, one of the things that the Economic Development Committee has access to is every business that operates in town. Would I be okay to reach out to somebody from that committee and ask them to reach out to their business people to add, or give them my form to help this process?
Oh, that would be awesome, Tim.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly how we would reach people. Yeah, I would, any way we can connect as much as possible. And I'm happy to even go and if you told me who, I'd be happy to meet in person with some of these people too, to talk with them. And so, anyway, yeah, that'd be perfect to get it out there.
Okay, and what's your target date that, we kind of need these names back to start your organization, Misty?
Yeah, I mean, I'd really like to have a solid list by the end of October, first week of November at the latest, because we need a good 2 weeks or so to then really get the participants organized and get a lot of communication and things logistically worked out with the participants. So it'd be helpful if we can really have a good list by the end of the month, the first week of November.
And that means that our list is solidified with people who have already been invited and who have said yes.
Yeah. Right.
So as far as having names for us to contact, end of the week would be good for us to start making those contacts.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the ones that we're going to reach out to, like I'll go to the Economic Development Committee and ask for them to put it out to their businesses and kind of keep both of you in the loop as far as where that's headed.
That sounds good. And any names that you've got, just keep filling them in there. And if you've made a contact, mark that off. If we need to make a contact, let us know.
Okay.
And I think it always helps to have maybe more than one person say, hey, yes, we are really interested in hearing what you have to say.
So the meal is steak, lobster, and it's an open bar? Is that?
Yes, all done digitally. So as long as you like your liquor digital, that's fine.
Nice, okay, great.
So I don't know if there's any other questions, but that's it for me.
Thank you, Misty.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Misty.
Were there any-
I'll try to get my homework done and get it to you by the end of the week. I might see it Monday.
Thank you.
I'm going to nominate Kathy King.
Were there any questions on the financials because that was the other report that was there.
My only two right now was what I already asked for, is the two reports to get over to Megan to get to the Budget Committee. And then we'll notify them of any changes that come in after. If forms go back and forth, I know there's a time period on the approval process, but because of the Budget Committee, can you just keep me in the loop of what's
Sure.
going on with
Yep.
those forms?
Well, Brian prepared some reports, and I didn't have as much time as I like to have gone through them, so I guess, was there anything there that he wants to point our attention to?
Right now, everything seems to be in order. Cash flow's good. We're paying everybody.
I don't know, it sounds like you're missing a couple checks in the last check run. But,
Well, they aren't the big ones.
well, they all matter.
They do.
Before
Go ahead.
we go into non-public, do you want to talk about the committee reassignment?
Oh, I wanted to bring this up. I know we had a request to start negotiations on the para contract.
Oh, and speaking of, yes, and also talking about committees, we need to look at CIP as well. Sorry.
Okay, I am having some time issues, and I was wondering if the board was willing to consider somebody else to do the negotiation on the para contract. Because I originally put up for it, but my time is pretty short as of late, and if they want to start anytime soon, I'm going to be potentially severely compromised, so I don't know if anybody else was willing to take on that role. Joel is the other person that's on it, me and Joel on the paras. I don't know if you have any volunteers.
I wouldn't mind trying it. My only question is should I try it as an alternate so that we have, you may.
Do it that way, or no? I just prefer to step aside because my time, like I said,
Right.
Yeah.
and we're meeting every week, and this is gonna fall, and they're gonna wanna, typically those fall every week or every other week, and
Right.
I'm not gonna be able to give it my all, so.
Must be cranky from all the hours you're working. I'm just plain cranky.
But no, I mean, I don't know if you're willing to do it.
I'm okay doing it.
Any discussion? I mean, there's two other members here present. I'm just not think I'm going to be able to fulfill my obligation successfully, so I would like to withdraw my participation and nominate my compadre here, Tim Brown, to fill my slot.
Second.
Any discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
So, motion passes. How about you just, get somebody to mow my lawn? No.
No.
And I don't know that we solidified the person who was going to do the CIP. Was that you, Tim, or was that?
I don't remember. I remember doing budget, obviously, but
Yeah.
CIP normally goes hand in hand with budget. I don't have a problem doing it.
Okay. We met last week.
Yeah.
They will be meeting Wednesdays at 4. There's one, I think, the end of this month. There's one November and December. I'll get you those dates.
Can you email Erica and just ask her to put me back on the mailing list? Is Erica still doing the?
Erica's still doing the,
Okay.
yeah. She tried hard to get out of it, but it didn't work.
Failed.
Yeah, if you can email her and just
Okay.
add her to put me on the notification list, I'll be at the next meeting. And the next meeting, if you could just give me a heads up to make sure I got that date.
Will do. I will send them to you tonight, so you've got them.
Okay. Who's the selectman's rep on that? Is it still
Paula.
Paula? Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any other business in public? Next meeting is October.
There's a question mark there because we have,
Monday's a holiday, right?
Monday is a holiday.
Is it a holiday for the school and staff?
It is, school and staff.
So we can meet earlier.
What do we
I
have?
am not
what do we
currently
have?
available on the 12th, just letting you know,
The 12th,
which will be a week from today.
okay.
So.
So you're not available that day?
I am not available that day. Did you want to meet either Tuesday, or do you want to wait until the 19th?
What do we have for pressing items that may cause us to need to meet next week?
At this point, I don't anticipate anything that's,
Manifest.
okay, manifest because we didn't have tonight. Okay, so
Which
that's
means that we
that's an off week. So usually it's first and third, but we could do,
Because of the rotation that we did
Right.
last week.
right. So if we do manifest, or I just chase down a couple of you to sign things.
Yeah, you can slide into the office and go over it.
I mean, I can come in on the 13th and sign manifest if it's a simple, you
Yeah,
need a
it's just
signature.
getting a signature
That's all it is.
so we can pay our bills. I mean,
Right.
it's-
Yeah.
So what's the thoughts on the board? Do we want to meet on the 19th?
I think the 19th is fine. That's fine.
Okay. So at this point, without any pressing things, next meeting will be the 19th, and you let us know when those manifests are ready to sign as an
We'll just-
email to the board.
We'll just plan for the 13th?
Yeah, I'll have to have her probably get it ready Friday.
Okay, or we have them, say, afternoon time on the 13th?
Should just send out an email blast,
Yep.
manifest ready to sign to anybody that can come in. Please let us know if you are, and then you can kind of,
Well,
Okay.
we're gonna need two, so I'll do the one signature if we can get a concrete second signature to come in during the day.
I mean, I could swing in at the end, towards the end of the day, or, I mean, I may be able to swing in to do it. I don't know if Joel or is gonna be around, but.
I'm
I
typically,
can,
I'm typically there until at least 5 and can stay later
I
if I
should be
know you're
able to
coming in.
blast in at time to sign it.
Too, so.
Yeah,
So just, I guess, send an email out to the board of when they're ready. And
Will do.
Brian can run it down if he had to.
He's got nothing better to do.
swing
the
by on the
office.
way home.
He could run it down at 11 o'clock on the way home.
In the morning?
Morning, yeah.
Thank you, Silas. Not hearing any other business, I'll make a motion to go into non-public session under RSA 91A:32 personnel, A, B, and C.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I want to thank everyone for attending and wish everyone a good night.